Alright, let's move on to chapter 14. The interesting thing about chapter 14, I believe, you do realize when this was written, when the Bible was written, it wasn't written in chapters and verses. We divided everything up in chapters and verses in order to help us understand, and we didn't always do the best job of it, and this is one of the examples, I believe. So chapter 14, you can read chapter 14, but pay attention from verse 1 through verse 5, I believe belongs in chapter 13. And I'll tell you why once we get there. So if you went ahead, you can push pause and you can read chapter 14. Alright, chapter 14, verse 1 through 5, you pay special attention to it. Why do I believe it belongs in chapter 13? Because look, chapter 13 ends with talking about the mark of the beast. And then we go from the mark of the beast to the mark of God, the seal of God. And I believe that that should have been the end of chapter 13, because the Lamb is standing where? On Mount Zion with who? The 144,000 who were sealed from Israel. Okay, remember we read, if you want to go back, you can read Zechariah chapter 14 again and pause it, and then push play again. But look, remember in Zechariah chapter 14, what did we read? The Lamb will do what? He will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is east of Jerusalem. Okay? Then he goes into Jerusalem through the eastern gate, stands on Mount Zion, and what happens? There he is, right here, with 144,000, standing on Mount Zion. When is this? At the end of the tribulation. That's when this is. That's why this is out of place right now. Because this is supposed to be at the end of the tribulation. But there is some stuff I struggle over when I'm thinking about it or when I'm looking at it. One of the things I struggle over is these 144,000 are addressed as first fruits. What are first fruits? First fruits is the first 10%. The first group. A lot of people have understood this to believe this is the first fruits of the nation of Israel who will turn to God during the tribulation period. I don't know. You know, it could be that. They could be the raptured saints. But I'm just going to stick with the first interpretation. Now, and this is one of the places where we have overwhelming evidence of a mid-tribulation rapture. And this would have been it. But because he's standing on Zion, I think he's actually on earth. And it's at the end of the tribulation. Now look at what happens at the end of the tribulation. We'll talk about that later. We'll just skip over that. Okay. Verse 6 through 12 is interesting. Why? Because you have an angel who now is going to present the gospel to the whole entire world. Now what does this angel represent? Does he represent an angel? He could be a spirit that is behind the spreading of the gospel for a short period of time, for the first part of the tribulation or something of that nature. But anyway, he has the everlasting gospel. He spreads it all throughout the world. The gospel gets preached. And remember in Matthew, if you want to read it, you can read it. I'm not going to go there, but you can read it. In Matthew 24 verse 14, Jesus said, first the gospel must be preached to all nations, then the end will come. This seems like it's going to happen somewhere during the tribulation period. Remember in Daniel chapter 11 when we read, what did it talk about? It said, those who know their God will be strong and do exploits. It looks like there's going to be some kind of revival at the same time that once the rapture happens, that looks like there's going to be some kind of revival and a lot of people are going to get saved, but at the same time the Antichrist is going to be persecuting the saints, and he's going to make Christianity illegal, and he's going to conquer every nation that opposes him and every nation that doesn't submit. We know Babylon does not submit to him. Now verse 13 is interesting because it looks like it's out of place, right? Read verse 13 real quick. Now verse 13 is thought to be a statement declared to the readers and not a statement of prophecy. It's declared to the readers. And verse 13, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Basically, it's just saying, if you die in the Lord right now, your works follow you, and blessed are you. That's what it looks like it's saying. It is addressing the readers of all times, and not a prophetic statement that something will happen at that period in time. It's a statement, you just pull it out, and it's talking to you right now. And 2,000 years ago when John wrote this, it was talking to him. And when Jesus died on the cross, it was talking to everybody at that point in time too. So this is something that's not a prophetic statement, but it's actually just a statement pulled out, just speaking straight to you. And we're going to see that again, because we're going to look, Jesus is going to make a statement like that too. In the middle of prophecy, he's just going to make a statement to everybody. He's going to make a statement to everybody. Alright, and then we see the reaping of the harvest with the Son of Man standing on the clouds. This will be the rapture, the end time rapture, the one that happens at the 7th trumpet. This one will happen right around the time where, in chapter 14 verse 1, when the Lamb is standing on Mount Zion with 144,000, it's going to all happen right around that time. Because when he's standing in Mount Zion at the 144,000, the Antichrist is going to gather all the armies in the world at Armageddon and try to attack him. And we're going to see that. It doesn't make sense, but that's what's going to happen. And then from verse 17 to the end of the chapter, that is talking about the battle of Armageddon. And how do we know it's talking about a battle? Because in verse 20, the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles. What horse? There were horses trampling horses in this war. The horses of God. And we're going to get to that. We'll get to that later. But Jesus comes down on what? A white horse. The armies of heaven are following him, and we're all riding white horses. And what do? We trample Satan, the Antichrist army, who is where? The Antichrist army. See, right now, the 144,000 and Jesus are on Mount Zion. So the Antichrist gathers all his armies in the world in order to attack Israel. Because Israel's, Jesus' kingdom has been declared on the earth. Jesus' kingdom has been declared on the earth. How long all this takes, I don't know. And I know it's not making sense right now, but it will make sense when we get to it. And one thing I just want to go ahead, we'll go ahead real quick, and I'm going to look at something. The Battle of Armageddon. Look at chapter 19. Look at chapter 19 and verse 19. And I saw the beasts, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. So, the Battle of Armageddon, the beast gathers all of his army together in order to make war with Jesus. That means Jesus is on the earth. That means Jesus is in Israel. Because otherwise, why would he gather the whole entire army together to fight against Jesus if he's not here? That means he comes down to earth, and when he comes down to the earth, the Antichrist gathers all of his army together in order to attack him. Alright. And the horses' bridles, this is close to 200 miles that the blood comes out. And notice, where is it at? It's outside of the city. So outside of the city of Jerusalem is a place called Armageddon. It's about It's about 50 miles away, but it's outside of the city of Jerusalem. And if you want to read, let's look at this. Daniel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. Now remember, for 3.5 years the Antichrist will be given. So once the 7-year tribulation is over, then Jesus comes, blows the 7th trumpet, stands on Mount Zion. He stands on Mount Zion. There's 144,000 with him. Then they all get on horses, and then once the Antichrist collects all the armies in Armageddon, then Jesus rides out there and just wipes them all out. But let's look at Daniel chapter 12. I want to look at something real quick. Something that we didn't cover. But this is going to explain something. Alright, Daniel chapter 12. Look at verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there should be 1,290 days. That's a little over 3.5 years. That's like 30 days more than 3.5 years. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. See, there's some extra days there. There's some extra days there. So what are those extra days? There's a little bit of extra days after the 7-year time period. There's like 100 and some odd days. And during this time period is when the Antichrist gathers all the armies together. Jesus comes down and he stands in Jerusalem, starts his kingdom on earth. The Antichrist gathers all his armies together and brings them into Armageddon. It takes a little while to do that. You can't just do that in 2 hours. It takes a couple days, maybe a month or two, but he has to gather all the armies on all the earth, all in Armageddon, in order for Jesus to destroy them. And he does destroy them. And it's pretty neat how this is all coming out and how this is being showed to us.